Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the North Arm Skaha II, the most recent version. This one in Magna Cut. Believe it or not, I actually don't have a review of this knife. I can hear you guys typing, you've reviewed this knife, you've reviewed this knife. I reviewed the previous generation with the ridges on the blade. This one that I picked up almost 4 months ago has been talked about a ton on this channel in top 5 videos, top 10 videos, in live streams. I am obsessed with this knife, and as you can see, this knife has had a decent workout over the last about 3.5 months, maybe 4 months or so. And the truth is, it has replaced some of my favorite EDC knives on rotation as the go-to knife. I'm a knife reviewer, so I am constantly switching knives out intentionally so that I can get a feel for different things. But when it's time to go out the door and I don't want to think about it and I want to throw a knife in my pocket, I am reaching for this guy. And that really surprises me because this knife, as I've mentioned before, is not really it's not to my taste. There's a lot of things here that I don't typically go for, but this knife is so well designed that I'm just a huge fan of it. You can buy these. They come in a bunch of different configurations. G10, carbon fiber, flashy, super, ultra, mega, superstorm, carbon fiber, whatever. These are made in Canada. I'll link the website right down below. I think it's 4 to 6 weeks for them to get it to you, but you can get them. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at _metal_complex. I know that the vast majority of the informed knife community is well aware of what this is. But as I've been shown here lately, there are literally hundreds of thousands of people who have recently discovered my channel who never knew that the knife community existed at all, let alone the Skaha. So it is important to talk about this, just keeping everybody up to date with what I think is really good, especially when you're going to spend a good chunk of money on a pocket knife. Let's go ahead and get a measurement real quick. Do specs for people who are not familiar with it. Overall length is coming in at surprisingly about 7 3/4 inches. And I say that because the knife feels about the same size as the Benchmade Griptilian, but it's not. I mean, it feels much lighter, but it feels about the same overall length, but it's not quite. Blade length, about 3.35 inches. Cutting edge, about 3 1/8. How about some size comparisons? Any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and Others, up against the AD10 and the AD20.5. Actually much closer to the size of the AD20.5, but it does feel longer. Just a little bit longer. Up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. This knife, the Para 3, specifically this one in Maximate, this was my old go-to, and I still reach for it. But this was the no-brainer, grab it, it's going to be like the most ideal thing in any situation for me, right? And it's still a fantastic knife. But I'm reaching for this guy more now, right? It's been this one for years. But up against these two, you can see it's a little closer to the Para 3. It actually has more cutting edge than both. Yeah, slightly more cutting edge than the Spyderco PM2. And then finally, excuse me, put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. Definitely closer, I think, to the Hogue Deca. How's the action? Well, that's the shining highlight, isn't it? Those of you watching this video who have known about the Skaha forever and probably have yours out on the couch flipping it right now, right? Oh my gosh. The action is so stupidly good. Now, I just adjusted the pivot, right? I haven't actually had to Loctite it. But this is the knife, you know, when people try to lean on fall shut action being on its own an element that is considered in a specific tier, a price tier, right? Fall shut action on its own is meaningless, right? You can get $30 pocket knives that will fall shut. There are so many different elements that create that. More important, right, is the combination of how smooth is the action and how meaningful is it with the design? Does it actually create convenience in relationship to the flipper tab, the shape of the flipper tab, the detent strength, right? Does the leverage that you're getting off of, maybe not the flipper tab, but whatever you're using to deploy it, does that leverage feel natural? Does it feel convenient, right? Is it satisfying? This knife is set up so perfectly for like the fastest, most brainless deployment. And that's what you want. It's a good thing. I don't want to have to get my knife out and go, well, let me remember how this one likes to deploy. Do I need to get it at this angle? Or, do I need to read it a bedtime story first and tell it how special a boy it is? Or can I just deploy it? Yeah, ideally, a good tool is just a good tool. You just deploy it, right? So you pull this thing out and you pull on the flipper tab and it deploys, which sounds like, like everything is like that nowadays. If you own this knife, if you have this knife right now, I know you're nodding along with me. This is different. I have reviewed, I don't know how many, I have over 4,300 uploads on this channel. I've handled a lot of stuff. I can confidently say I regularly handle way more knives than the average person. Way more. Even the average knife enthusiast. Just given the nature of this channel and how it operates, I'm going to put my hands on a lot more stuff than the average person. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm trying to say, when I tell you guys that the action on this is above, it is next level. It is next level. The leverage off the flipper tab, the detent break is so crispy. It's so good. On top of that, another thing that I look for is access to the locking system, which in this case is a nested liner lock, and it works just fine, but access to it is perfect. They've scalloped this area out. These scales are a little bit thick because they're contoured, but in a really good way, and we'll get to that. Access to it, great. Push it over, no lock stick. Flipper tab falls down and catches my thumb. You turn it, and it falls in a controlled way down into the closed position perfectly. I would not alter a single element of that. It's that is one of the main things that makes me reach for this, because the knife is so easy and so reliable. I don't like knives where I'm slipping off the flipper tab, or I'm not catching it the right way, or I have to bend I've got a candy cane in my finger. Oh, this is a light switcher. I got to candy cane it right out. I don't have to do that. There's no surprises. It takes less than one total brain cell to deploy this. I can focus on what I'm doing rather than all of the little hoops and things that I sometimes have to jump through depending on the knife that I'm carrying. And my brain zeroes in on that stuff after carrying and switching out with so many different knives. This is perfection. This is exactly what you want. It is everything that we have come to expect as nose in the air, snobby knife enthusiasts. Everything we've come to expect. And what's funny is that this knife has been doing that for years. It's been doing this for years. It's been good, it's still good, and it's one of the best examples of convenience, satisfaction, utility. It's all of that, right? The action is very good. It runs on bearings. You probably could have guessed that. Okay, carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's thicker, but in the best way possible. This thing is so stupidly lightweight. I mean, it is crazy. There is nothing on the inside of this carbon fiber scale. It's solid carbon fiber, but it's a good enough chunk. There's no flex. It doesn't feel like it's gonna be the same way with the G10 versions. It doesn't feel delicate in the hollow way. Like I always reference the Benchmade bug out with the injection mold plastic scales. Those are thin scales, slightly contoured, but massively hollowed out. These are not hollowed out, but it's carbon fiber or G10, still lightweight, and backed up with, well, basically it's not even backed up with it. It's the actual steel liner that's nested into the carbon fiber. The end result here is a knife that feels like a full-size capable knife, but it is unbelievably lightweight, which is something I don't normally go for because it feels cheap, right? But carrying this and using it, sorry, we need to get to the right thing here. Oh, I just went past it. But the benefit here, went past it twice. Idiot reviewer. Okay. The benefit here is that it's so lightweight. 2.8 ounces, that's past my own personal line, right? 3 ounces usually I don't like to go under because it gets so lightweight, under 3 ounces, that I'm worried I'm going to wash it or forget that it's there. But there's enough presence with this knife. It's big enough and it fills the hand to the point where that zone where I'm like, it feels delicate or I'm going to lose it, right? It alleviates that. Because when I pick it up and when I hold it, it feels secure in my hand. It feels natural. It feels comfortable. It doesn't feel like a little pen knife or a credit card, which is normally what you get with the lightweight stuff. It works, right? It's a lot of what I love about the Ritter Hogue or the Benchmade Griptilian. It's got that kind of, I don't know, should we call it like an eggplant shaped handle, kind of. but it's so much lighter. It's so much lighter. You're sacrificing literally nothing else about the knife, right? I mean, the locking system, okay, fine, but it feels good. That's the best way to put it. It's the right combination of size and comfort, solidity, and weight to make you want to carry it all the time, which I do. So let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. I about put this away, but I realized the body screws are T8. 2 T8 screws on each side. Easy, right? And then you actually have T10 for the pivot and the pocket clip screw, right? Which unfortunately cannot be mounted on the other side. Dang it, I didn't look this detail up. I'll let you guys go to the website if you want to. I don't know if they make a left-handed version of this. If they don't, obviously that they need to have this milled out, for lefties. Something tells me that they do. And not looking up that detail, I'll apologize to you guys, but I feel like they do. I would be really surprised if they didn't. This one is just set up for right-handed people with the position of the pocket clip being specific to this side and the fact that the liner lock is a right-hand liner lock. But anyways, we have a T10 pivot. This is stupidly easy to take apart. I haven't actually had to do that. I've only had to adjust the pivot, which I wouldn't have to do if I Loctited it, but I just haven't really had to. I've only really had to adjust the pivot once, and so I just have felt no reason really to take it apart, and it just isn't getting gunked up because of what I normally use it for. But that'll vary from person to person. Either way, very easy to take apart. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Let's go ahead and measure the blade stock thickness of this guy. Blade stock thickness coming in at, we're in fractions here. All of my equipment is just not set the way that it was. Blade stock thickness is 97 thousandths. It's very thin. Also, something that I didn't used to go for. I am more so going towards that. Like when I started, I was much more like I just want to carry something that I think is cool. And oftentimes I would gravitate towards knives with thicker blade stocks because I thought it was cool. And I knew that the cutting geometry would slow me down a little bit, but it didn't slow me down enough to the point where I was like, I don't want to carry this stuff. I just liked it. When a blade has such great geometry, when it's really got incredible geometry, in this case it's a thin blade stock, drop point blade, full flat ground. Incredibly thin edge. When it has all that together and it's on a frame that just makes you feel good, makes you want to carry it, and it's got all the right elements, all the right combinations, that can be the cherry on top. And it is. The cutting geometry of this is absolutely phenomenal. But we'll get to that. Have we done everything? Let's move on to the meat and potatoes. There's really only one complaint that I have with the ergonomics, and it's to the point where I only notice it when I am forcing myself, to pay attention to it. And that's the fact that the flipper tab is angled down into your index finger. Now, this is really only a problem if you're hammer gripping it and you're really putting a ton of force, like if you're trying to break down thick cardboard, you're cutting into styrofoam, rubber, something like that, wood, something that's going to give you a lot of resistance. You're going to feel that flipper tab kind of push back into you. Even if it does, it's not all that sharp. I mean, it's not sharp at all. There's just a little bit of jumping there. Continued use, you're gonna give yourself a blister. You're gonna rub that skin raw right there. But normal use, most of the time I'm holding it like this, or I'm holding it like this, right? Or maybe something like this, or I guess periodically, like this. Most of the time I felt that doesn't really bother me, but I do notice it. It's there, and depending on what you use this knife for, you might be super bothered by it. So that's definitely worth pointing out. And I feel like I pointed that out in the original review, which was 4 years ago, but I honestly can't remember. The scales themselves are incredibly comfortable because of the they're so rounded, so contoured. It's wonderful. The quality of the carbon fiber in this case is great. You could go with G10 for about $45 less, or you can go with a special carbon fiber for about $45 more. The standard carbon fiber is going to run you, I think it's $45 more than the base price, which I think is $242 or $245. Can't remember, somewhere in there. But very simple layout. The scale length and just the shape of things outside of the flipper tab is super comfortable. Because this is a wire clip, the clip itself is not bothersome. I don't really like wire clips, but I'll admit they don't really bother my hand, right? So fine. The jimping is short but functional. There is a little choke up spot here. I'd call it a single knuckle choke up spot. It's not my favorite choke up spot in the world, but it works. I find myself not really using it hardly ever. The blade this time around, or these more recent ones, are MagnaCut. If they're using other steels, I'm unaware. I believe they got this to about 63, which is awesome, and it shows. I have not had to touch this knife up, and you can, if you've been watching my channel for a while, you guys know I use my knives, but like for some reason, like newer people are like, wait a minute. They just have a really hard time. Like even if like somebody like me who shows my collection, I have tons of knives. I've gotten past the point where I'm bothered to carry and use knives at a certain price point. I remember thinking a $200 or $300 knife is a knife that I would treasure like a jewel and would never use it because it's this delicate, sacred object. You get past that, right? If you're new, right, and you're thinking that's a lot of money. Yeah, I agree. I remember thinking that too, right? But I'm here to tell you that there's a point, and it's with a lot of us, where that amount of money for a knife doesn't really bother us, and we do in fact go out and use them. But it takes a little bit to convince people, right? So you think whatever you want. I'm not going to spend too much time trying to convince you. This knife got a good workout. The MagnaCut on this is definitely not quite as sharp as it was when I got it, but holy moly, it's still going just fine. In fact, only really getting hung up in a couple of spots there. I don't, go out and chop down trees with this thing. The heaviest workout it's going to get is a lot of the materials that I was just talking about earlier, right? Styrofoam and cardboard probably being some of that. I think a couple of times I cut some zip ties, but really great. The cutting geometry on this is so good. That's what really makes an awesome blade. Even if you don't have the best steel or you don't have the best heat treat, which you don't have to have, there is no best steel, but you should have a good heat treat and good geometry, right? The geometry alone on this is what's allowing it to perform so well. It's just the extra bonuses are the fact that it's MagnaCut and heat treated super well. This has been phenomenal. Obviously not the type of knife that you go out and baton with. This is not a screwdriver. It's not a hammer, right? It's a cutting tool. So if you use it the way that it's intended, it will perform incredibly well. And this has, right? I'm honestly not going to recommend that you cut zip ties, but I have been, and it's been doing a great job. So yeah, the blade is also a high polished stone wash, which is my go-to finish. I'm going to demonstrate, a lot of times like the evidence of like hard use online is like a picture of a knife that's like, got like, maybe it's just like this. It's a little dirty. And then what they do is they turn the structure up really high, right? And they turn the sharpness up really high. They turn the contrast up really high. Maybe even the saturation, right? And then that really accentuates the hard use that the knife has been going, oh yeah, I use my stuff. Beat it into the ground because it's a tool. I'm a hardcore man. I use my tools in a hardcore way. A lot of times, that's just normal. That's just like cutting tape and stuff, right? I could probably, give you an example like this. I could probably take a still of exactly this right here, exactly this right here. Hashtag use your shit. Put it on screen in a still shot and show you exactly what I'm talking about. But the truth is that use like that is oftentimes pretty normal and pretty mild. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I have a preference for this finish because the way that it wears in over time, it's lightly tumbled, but it's still really reflective. And so not only does it not slow you down while you're cutting because it's got a nice, smooth, shiny finish, it's also relatively easy to clean. It's not going to allow moisture to get trapped quite as easily as something like a bead blasted blade. And it also doesn't ever really look bad. Like even if you mark it up or scratch it up over time, I'm just going to do a light cleaning job here. I'm just going to clean a couple of months of use like off the blade. And some of these marks here are probably less like scratches. They're probably more just like adhesive or tape residue. It's gotten kind of stuck to the blade. So if I worked at it for a bit, I could probably get a lot more of it off. But a lot of times the difference between a knife that looks like it's never ever been used and a knife that's claiming to be like hardcore used by like the master level ninja knife user 9000 on Instagram, a lot of times the difference is just not cleaning it. Like, all that means is I don't clean my blade. Like, 99% of the time, that's what that looks like, right? I'm not trying to invite, argument or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, a lot of that I think is a lot of spaghetti sauce, right? It's just a lot of extra nothing. But the finish usually looks pretty good after a little bit of a rub down, with a microfiber cloth, and in this case some break-free CLP, which isn't the best thing to clean it with, but it'll work. I just love how that finish looks, and it's not super easy to scratch, and it just it always looks nice, right? And it makes it easy to push the blade through material, right, that would otherwise be slowed down by a thicker geometry or like a chalky DLC or PVD coating. That'll slow you down a little bit. This blade does not get slowed down. It's great. The tip has been great, right? If I ever need to puncture anything, which is not very often. It's great. There's not really much more to say about the blade. They did a pretty good job with the bevel. It's a little tiny bit thinner down here than it is up here, but not bad. Not to the point where it really bothers me. On this side, it's perfect. Haven't had to strop it yet, but when I do, I imagine it'll strop right back up and be just fine. I imagine the way that I use this, the way that a normal, just like a regular knife Joe uses their knife, would probably be, it's been 3 months, right? So using it like a regular pocket knife, you're not going to have to do that very often. But when you do, if it starts to fatigue, right, if I really want to, I would imagine, in fact, here it is. It's actually still got some compound on it. So I'll give you an example. It's like, this is 3 months of, I would call this like light use, right? You kind of saw like how it's cutting, right? This is doing a pretty good job. It's kind of lifting the edges. But the way that this is set up, stropping it should be pretty darn easy. If we just do, and you guys can critique my, like how I'm doing this if you want to. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're just going to do this real quick just so I can prove a point. Because this is just a slightly curved drop point blade, just a little bit of belly, right? There's not a change in, it's not like a Tanto or anything. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you can critique my, how I'm doing that all you want. But my point is, it just doesn't take much. Oh, it's crazy. The difference that just that made. Just my sloppy, stupid, nothing technique, 10 on each side, not even doing it right. Brought that 99% back to life. That's crazy. But that's what I like. I don't want to have to put a ton of effort into it. Obviously, after a ton of use, eventually, you can't always strop things back to life, especially if you get a little nick in the blade or something like that. Eventually, you're going to have to sharpen it, or, worst case scenario, you have to reprofile it. But most of the time, that's all it takes, right? That MagnaCut holds up so well for regular use, right? Strop it. Now, if I sat here for 15 minutes or so doing it exactly right, I could probably get that thing absolutely screaming sharp just off the strop and some compound, right? Novice sharpener, goofball, messing around with a little piece of leather, right? If I can do it, anybody can do it, and that's my point. That's fantastic. Moving on. We have a lanyard hole. I don't really care. If you like lanyards, there you go. There's nothing super special going on here with the hardware. It's incredibly basic, right? This is definitely an expensive tool more than it is an expensive collector's item, which there are markets for. Nobody's wrong, right? I consider myself in both camps. I think that's fine. But if you like the super shiny embellished stuff, there's not really any of that going on here. Very basic barrel standoffs. Pocket clip position, in my opinion, is a little bit low. I don't know why it's not higher, but it's also not shallow carry, right? I like a medium to deep carry clip, and if I'm being real, it's medium carry, so that's fine. I don't like that the clip is so low that the bill goes into the middle of my hand, so while the pocket clip isn't really a problem, the main reason I want it scooted up a bit is because if it has to be this length, at least it would be further back down in my hand rather than here when I'm holding it in a hammer grip, but that's pretty nitpicky, right? The stop pin is located, right there, and there's a little bit of shouldering. Can we see right there? So that's great. I've never experienced any blade play on this. Only the blade coming slightly off center from the pivot screw backing out during use. And I don't have a problem with that because I have the tools to tighten it. And if I really want to, I can use some blue 242 to Loctite it in place. I didn't have to adjust the pivot until like 2.5 months into using it. It was only recently, right? So I'm not really very bothered by that. No blade play up, down, left, or right. Maybe the tiniest little bit, like a microscopic amount of stick. No, not really. Geez, I don't know. Yeah. I feel like sometimes I feel it want to, but it's not doing it right now. So, okay. As far as pivot lash goes, nope. We have incredibly smooth action right here in that detent. Right there at the bottom. Right there. It's at the very... That is wild. Oh, man, that detent is crazy. Let me try and show you guys exactly where that goes in. Yeah, right at the bottom. Wild. Nice and strong, but in the best way. Really, really good. Any detent lash? None. Completely solid. So, these are made in Canada, right? Which is not China. So, it's not going to be cheap. So, people are going to say, carbon fiber and MagnaCut, I can get that from X company for X amount. Yeah, but if it's substantially less, it might be because it's from China, right? So this is on the more expensive side at about $242, $244, something like that. But it is such a good tool and it is so stupidly well made. It's really hard for me to complain about that. I thoroughly believe that this is one of the greatest EDC knives that exists. I mean, it's up there with the Ritter Hogue and the Para 3, right? If you're a big fan of the Hogue Deca, for sure, when we're talking about like non-Chinese EDC knives. But the reason I like this one so much is because of how capable it feels and how capable it is, while still managing to be incredibly lightweight and essentially something that I will carry no matter what I'm wearing. A lot of times if I'm, wearing athletic shorts, I'm like, I can't carry the, I'm not going to carry the 80-10 in the athletic shorts because that's just uncomfortable. I don't want my pants falling down. This is a knife I'll carry with anything, right? It's an anything environment knife. I mean, if I'm going to dinner, fine. I mean, it'll go in slacks just fine. It's not going to look the coolest, but it's easy to carry. If I'm going to go out and work outside, right? No problem. If I'm just going about my day, no problem. I mean, literally anywhere as long as the blade length is legal. I love this. My only real nitpick is the angle of the flipper tab, but I don't really notice it that much. I also wish the pocket clip wasn't a wire clip, but I'd be lying if I said that it wasn't super convenient, which is something I've always said about wire clips. I wish it was scooted back a bit, I feel like North Arm just is like, yeah, we know what we made. Like, thanks for the... I feel like if they watch this, they'd be like, yeah, thanks for the criticisms, but we know what we've got here. And they'd be right. This is stupidly recommendable. This is an extremely recommendable knife. I just thought that this was too plain Jane for me and that I wasn't going to like how lightweight it was. And I cannot get this thing out of my pocket. It is nothing flashy. There's really no like major standout styling points other than just looking like a nice minimalistic pocket knife, I guess. It's just very, very purpose built, and like every part of the knife is just meant for convenience and utility for the end user, and I think they nailed that. So this is going to go on my most recommended knives playlist, and it's also going to go on my favorite knives of all time. I think this is definitely a step up from the last one I reviewed with the ridges, because the ridges kind of slow you down while you're cutting, but I cannot stop carrying this knife. I absolutely love it. That's going to be pretty much it for me today, guys. Check this knife out down in the description. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.